Prime Minister Netanyahu says that the war in Gaza is going better than expected. The comment to the Wall Street Journal came as the IDF tightened its grip around the terrorist stronghold in Khan Yunis. ILTV's Steve Leibovich has more.
Day 115 of the war in Gaza, and the noose continues to tighten around remaining Hamas fighters in and under Khan Yunis. The IDF is battling street by street and building by building, widening control to the west after encircling the southern Gaza Hamas stronghold. IDF troops directed several airstrikes and artillery at targets in close proximity, where Hamas activity was identified. The next and perhaps final IDF maneuver in Gaza is expected to be toward Rafah on the Egyptian border. But some 1.5 million civilians have taken refuge in the city, and military advances in the area could require Egyptian cooperation. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says that while Hamas leaders are in Qatar enjoying a full life of luxury, the terror group's commanders on the ground in Gaza are dying and surrendering by the thousands, bringing a hostage deal closer to fruition. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Prime Minister Netanyahu put the war in perspective, saying it's going better than many expected. Netanyahu said it took the U.S. and its allies 9 months to defeat radical forces in Mosul. He was referring to the 2016-2017 war against ISIS in Iraq. Mosul is smaller than Gaza, said Netanyahu, and it did not have the massive terror underground infrastructure. We are now in the 4th month. Meanwhile, Israeli demonstrators, including a number of relatives of hostages held in Gaza, staged a protest on the Israeli side of the Kerem Shalom crossing and have been attempting to block the passage of aid trucks into the Gaza Strip with the war ongoing.
I'm here because I don't believe that anybody in Gaza should be getting our humanitarian aid. This is a war going on here, and my brothers are fighting out there, and this is just prolonging the war.
Protesters said aid should go in only after the defeat of Hamas.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
An IDF soldier is in serious condition after a terrorist wielding an axe rammed his vehicle into a group of soldiers near the Navy base. The terrorist who fled the vehicle attempted to attack with the axe, as a quick response from Israeli forces resulted in the terrorist being shot at the scene. The wounded soldier was rushed to the Rambam healthcare campus in Haifa, while another suspect was arrested. Earlier, forces thwarted a potential terror attack near Tkoa Junction, neutralizing the terrorist right away. The police is still investigating both attacks. This is a developing story. More countries have now joined the growing list of nations defunding UNRWA, amplifying global concerns over alleged Syrian staff involvement in the October 7 massacre. And ILTV's Devo Klein has the details.
The European Commission, Romania, Austria, Estonia, and Japan are joining the defunding of UNRWA, joining Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, Finland, Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Iceland, following allegations that its staff members participated in the October 7th massacre. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged donor countries not to suspend funding, emphasizing the vital role UNRWA plays in supporting 2 million civilians in Gaza. He acknowledged the need for accountability for alleged staff misconduct, but urged against penalizing the organization's broader humanitarian efforts. Israel's UN Ambassador Gilad Erdan called for a suspension of support from all donor states and a thorough investigation into the involvement of UNRWA employees in alleged terror activities. The accusations against UNRWA employees include disturbing details revealed by the New York Times, such as a school counselor accused of abducting a woman from Israel, a social worker allegedly involved in bringing the body of a dead Israeli soldier to Gaza, and a staff member participating in the Kibbutz Be'eri massacre. The suspensions concern at least $363 million pledged to UNRWA, part of its budget of over $1.6 billion, at least aiming to support 5.9 million Palestinians across Gaza, Judea and Samaria, East Jerusalem, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. As tensions escalate, various nations and officials weigh in, with the Turkish Foreign Ministry urging countries to reconsider their funding pause, and the Palestinian Authority accusing Israel of orchestrating an oppressive campaign against the agency.
With the European Commission and Romania now also joining the list of countries suspending funds to UNRWA, and the latest concerning reports by the New York Times, we're now joined in studio by entrepreneur, investor, and member of the World Jewish Congress, Terry Newman. Terry, great having you here today. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So really, I want to start with the New York Times report. New details have been revealed today, joining the latest revelations from the last couple of days of what its workers have done during October 7 massacre. What's the latest we know?
Well, I mean, let's start with just realizing how concerning this is. You know, members of UNRWA were involved in the massacre of the 7th of October. But we're also seeing as well, they weren't just involved in the massacre itself, they were involved in actually holding the hostages, in moving the hostages from an UNRWA building to another UNRWA building. We've even got stories from hostages who have been freed saying they were fed UNRWA food in UNRWA buildings. So this is not a UN organization. UNRWA, despite its name, is a Palestinian organization run by Palestinians for the purposes of promoting the Palestinian cause. And, you know, I think if you realize that the entire world has one refugee agency, other than one specific group of people, and I'm sure you can guess who they are, the Palestinian people, this has to stop. I mean, you know, the only organization that deals with refugees that has more refugees today than it had when it was set up is UNRWA. The only organization in the world that can create refugees, and I'll say that word again, create refugees, and pass it from generation to generation is
UNRWA. That's the answer.
And so therefore, you know, as the United Nations, as other, you mentioned Romania just before, but if you look at the countries that have said, hang on a second, what's going on here, we can see that these are the countries who democracy, who freedom and other important values of the Western world are central to their outlook.
But I want to ask you, Terry, Israel has been calling to defund UNRWA for years by now. No one's listening, and now the countries are waking up. Is it because they really didn't know, or did they know but they can't ignore it anymore?
That's an excellent question, and I think the answer to that is as follows. Listen, there is a requirement for Palestinian people as part of developing countries to get aid, to get development aid. There are many other countries in the world where the UN provides development aid, where other countries, wealthier countries, provide development aid. So Gaza and the West Bank are examples of where that should be done, but they should be done as humanitarian organizations that give humanitarian aid rather than refugee-creating mechanisms. And if I may say, you know, this is part of the debasing of the international organizations that were set up after World War II to protect human rights, to protect refugees. I can give you two other examples. I spoke a couple of years ago in the UN Council for Human Rights. When Iran and North Korea are members of it, how can that be how can that be a serious organization for human rights? It's the debasing of the organization. Another example from last week, you know, the International Court of Justice. South Africa, a country that had just hosted the Sudanese warlord, Emedeti, who had carried out a real genocide. I've been to Darfur, right? Carried out a real genocide, was welcomed there with a red carpet, and they are taking Israel to court over genocide.
You can't compare it. And you know, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, not necessarily a friend of Israel during this war, right? He's calling to maintain the aid because Gazan civilians need this aid. How do you see a way to continue with UNRWA, or maybe not, to help those Palestinians, but not the way it's happening right now?
So I think UNRWA needs to be scrapped. I think a humanitarian development organization should be set up. Those funds should be run by Western countries, by Abraham countries, those who've signed on the Abraham Accords, and that money should go to the Palestinian people. The current situation where, in effect, we are saying to Hamas, you take all your funds and you use it to build terror tunnels and attack Israel, whilst we use our funds in order to look after your population, has to end. It's bad for the Palestinians, it's bad for Israel, and it's bad for the world.
Definitely, and I think we should be happy the world is waking up right now. Thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
In an undisclosed meeting in Paris, the United States, Israel, Qatar, and Egypt engage in negotiations to secure the release of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza.
The Prime Minister's office has confirmed a pivotal four-way meeting between the United States, Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. This undisclosed gathering in Paris amid to negotiate the release of 132 Israeli hostages held by Hamas. The discussions were deemed constructive by the Prime Minister's office, though acknowledged the substantial gaps persist. CIA Director Bill Burns engaged in discussions with David Barnea of Mossad, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Awad al-Rahman bin Jassam al-Ta'ini, and Egyptian intelligence chief Abbas Kamal. The Israeli delegation included Ronen Bar from Shin Bet and IDF hostage envoy Nitzan Alon. The emerging agreement contemplates a 2-month ceasefire in exchange for release of the hostages. Reports suggest a phased approach, where the first stage involves halting hostilities to facilitate the release of vulnerable hostages by Hamas. In return, a significant number of Palestinian prisoners would be freed. The next phase aims to secure the release of Israeli soldiers and civilian men, alongside a larger release of Palestinian prisoners. Additionally, the deal calls for increased humanitarian aid access to Gaza. While optimism surrounds the potential breakthrough, Israeli officials caution against high expectations, citing Hamas's unwavering demands for a complete stop of the war and its retention of power in Gaza. As the talks progress, family of hostages intensifies calls for a resolution, with President Joe Biden engaging with leaders of Egypt and Qatar to address the urgent humanitarian situation. These negotiations in Paris, led by CIA Director Burns, signal a potential turning point. However, the delicate nature of the discussions and the complex demands on both sides require careful navigation in the coming days.
U.S. President Joe Biden has vowed to strike back after a drone attack by an Iranian-backed terrorist group killed 3 U.S. troops in northeast Jordan. These were the first U.S. fatalities to U.S. soldiers in the Middle East since the start of the war in Gaza. ILTV's Steve Leibovich has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden announced the news of the attack on a U.S. military post in Jordan as he delivered a speech in South Carolina.
I want to point out that we had a tough day last night in the Middle East. We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases. And I'd ask you for a moment of silence, and we shall respond.
The president later released a statement saying the response will be at a time and in a manner of U.S. choosing. The statement left no doubt about the culprit, saying, "While we are still gathering the facts of this attack," he said, "we know it was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq." The servicemen were killed and 25 others injured in what were the first American military fatalities from hostile fire amid Israel's war in Gaza. The attack occurred at a base in northeast Jordan near the Syrian border where the troops were based. The deaths of U.S. service members could cause the U.S. to respond more forcefully against Iran. A U.S.-led mission is already actively confronting the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen for attacks on Red Sea commercial shipping. The United States and its allies have fired back, striking inside Yemen multiple times. The actors in the region will be closely watching the U.S. response this time.
And we're now joined by Dr. Gerald Steinberg, head of NGO Monitor and an expert on U.S.-Israel relations, as well as the art of negotiations. Dr. Steinberg, many in the Middle East didn't even know that there are U.S. troops on Jordanian territory. How many soldiers and what are they doing there?
It's not something that the U.S. government wants to advertise. Neither do the Jordanians want to advertise it because they become targets for internal political debate. There are also U.S. troops in Iraq. There are some in parts of Syria, not with the coordination of the Assad government. And there's always a low-key issue. But now they're clearly on the front pages. It's something that the U.S. government is going to have to deal with. And we're seeing a lot of activity. Whether that will be a lot of threatening but no action, or whether there will be a military strike, remains to be seen. But I think it has clearly changed the calculus of the Biden administration. They have to decide also when they're going to elections less than a year from now, do they want to look weak or do they want to look strong? And then also perhaps trigger some criticism from the left wing of the Democratic Party. That's all part of the calculation.
Yes, of course. And now Iran is trying to distance itself from the attack. But I mean, all fingers are pointing at Iranian-backed militias as the culprit. Who carried out the attack and which kind of drone? I mean, it caused a lot of damage, right?
Well, first of all, there were 3 Americans that were killed. That's a very big deal for the United States. And that's something that we hear echoing throughout the U.S. Media and political circuit. There's a lot of demand from members of Congress and others to take action. Now, who did this? Well, the Iranians have this network of proxies. We know it very well. We have Hezbollah on the north. We have the Houthim in Yemen. And we have these militias that operate in Iraq. But they're all part of the Iranian network. Now, whether the Iranians specifically ordered this attack or whether there's a certain set of some sort of freedom of movement. We had that debate also when Hezbollah attacks Israel, not now, where the attacks are daily, but over the years, whether Hezbollah and Nasrallah are acting on their own to some degree or whether it's coordinated with Iran. It doesn't make any difference. The address is clear. This is part of the Iranian proxy network of terrorists, and the United States is going to have to decide how best to respond. Up until now, in fact, Iran has largely been immune from a direct American response, and I suspect that will continue, but we may see some strong American action against the proxies, as has occurred over the last few weeks, including in the Gulf, where U.S. and British forces are also responding slowly, and some would argue too weakly, to the attacks on shipping from the Houthi proxy groups.
A strong U.S. presence in the region. Now, what are you expecting as a U.S. response? American soldiers, as you said, really were killed, were wounded. What are you expecting from the U.S. to do?
If we follow what the Biden administration has done recently, and also going back to the Obama administration, the odds are that what we're going to see is a relatively limited attack. The United States, under Democratic administrations, does not want to escalate. They don't want to have an active war during the lead up or during the American election campaign. So they want to keep it down to a certain level, but they also do not want to look weak and invite increased, escalated Iranian attacks or proxy attacks. So I suspect that it'll be something in the middle. We'll see some sort of American response, very much like what happened also in the Gulf after the first attacks by the Houthi group against American shipping and against American naval vessels. There were direct, I would say, limited responses against Houthi assets, military assets, but not a widespread attack to prevent further Houthi aggression. So that's usually what the United States under these administrations does. It tries to balance or calculate between different levels. It probably will not end the conflict, but it will perhaps send a signal.
Yes, now Biden will have to deal with the reveal that they're there. Thank you so much, Gerald, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And now, while Israel has faced an influx of criticism since the start of the war, it is important not to forget the outpouring of support from all over the world, specifically from the evangelical community. And in this incredible show of solidarity, evangelical Christian humanitarian aid organization Samaritans Purse has replaced 21 fully equipped ambulances that had been destroyed since the start of the war. And ILTV's Ariel Alachiani attended the unveiling. Take a look.
In an incredible show of solidarity, Samaritans Purse donated $4 million to Magen David Adom to replace 14 fully equipped ambulances destroyed since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. In addition to the 14 ambulances, the organisation is donating 7 armoured ambulances to MDA, which are still in production and will be ready for use this spring.
Franklin Graham and Samaritan Purse initiative to donate 21 ambulances to Magen David Adom is now materializing, and it is simply a life-saving gift to the people of Israel. 14 of them are now here, and they will go out and be stationed throughout the country, hopefully be able to provide the necessary medical treatment to people in need, and the additional 7 who will be bulletproof will arrive in a few months to Israel and reinforce the fleet of life-saving vehicles of Magen David Adom. So we are so grateful for this partnership and for them. They are simply standing shoulder to shoulder with us and supporting us and the people of Israel.
The event was attended by many esteemed figures, including the Mayor of Jerusalem and renowned evangelical Christian leader Reverend Franklin Graham, son of the late Billy Graham.
When I heard that there are 14 ambulances that are destroyed, I just immediately said, we're going to replace every one of them. And then when I came and I saw they had some armored ambulances, but they were old. I'm not sure they could even get to a crisis. I said, let's replace those too.
We're thrilled to be here with Samaritans Purse. They have done an extraordinary thing with this gift of 21 ambulances, 14 of which are here today and being dedicated, and they are in honor of the 14 of the MADA paramedics and EMTs who lost their lives during this horrendous war. And it means so much to us that we have the American Christian community behind us as we're all working to try to save lives in Israel each and every day.
Each ambulance is dedicated to the memory of one of the MDA paramedics who was killed in action, including 4 who were murdered on October 7th, tending to the wounded.
We'll take something that was there, it's their name tag, their badge, off their uniform, and put it on the inside of the ambulance, and it will stay there. So that not only will their name be on the ambulance, but something that was personal to them will be in the ambulance as it goes.
We are grateful, extremely grateful for the Christian world that supports Israel and is strong for Israel. We're grateful for Samaritan's Purse that has donated these ambulances and done it in the names of some of our fallen who have died on October 7th and days later. We want to thank the American, the Canadian, the Christian communities around the world for supporting Israel, doing advocacy, staying strong with us, and we wish that you will continue and be steadfast in your support for us.
The families of each fallen MDA paramedic were present for the unveiling of their ambulances, including Yael Newman, wife of the late Eitan Newman, who was killed at the start of the war. Eitan was a dedicated paramedic who was passionate about saving lives, specifically the importance of CPR.
כשאני רואה את האמבולנסים האלה, ואני יודעת שהם בסוף למטרה של הצלת חיים, זה מרגש ומשמח. זה ממשיך את הדרך של איתן, ואני מרגישה שהוא איתנו, אני מרגישה שהוא נמצא איתנו כאן, וזה מרגש לראות נוצרים שמאמינים בעם היהודי ובצורך שלנו לחיות כאן ולהמשיך את החיים כאן בארץ.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rainy showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 9 degrees Celsius or 47 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, heavy winds and light rain can be expected alongside temperatures reaching highs of 13 degrees Celsius or 56 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and of course, do not forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all of the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Amit Harari. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.